Welcome to Nevada County Snapshots. I'm your host, Cheryl Noble. Our beautiful corner of the Sierra Nevada foothills is rich with diverse natural beauty, one-of-a-kind landmarks, historic, charming towns, world-class cultural events, and so much more. Our program looks at all things grand and glorious in Nevada County. Why don't you come join me and discover or rediscover what's right here in our backyard. Okay, we're at Rock Creek Nature Trail, which is about 6 miles out of Nevada City. And today I'm with Ann Westling, the Public Affairs Officer for the Tahoe National Forest. She's on my right, and on my left is Kathy Van Zoot, a botanist with the Tahoe Forest. They're going to tell us all the great stuff about Rock Creek. Hello, ladies. Hi. And we'll start with you and give us just a quick overview. We're standing from the information booth for Rock Creek. Tell us about it.
Well, this trail was developed many, many years ago, and right now the brochure that we have talks about the ecosystems that are found at Rock Creek.
Okay, we're heading on the trail.
Let's go.
It's right here.
What do we have here?
We have a spider. Just created a beautiful web here in the dogwood, hanging out looking for a meal.
It's a small little guy.
There's another one over here.
Yeah.
And for folks that are hummingbird aficionados, hummingbirds use the spider webs to help construct their nest. And they'll also use lichen, feathers, dog fur a little bit, so lots of fuzzy, fluffy stuff.
Okay. We're going to go to the other side of the trail and hit the creek side with some waterfalls. Let's go.
The stream went that direction and kind of undercut the far bank. That's a great place for fish to hide. And you notice that the depth of the water in that pool right there is deeper. Great place to catch fish. Not that I'm suggesting you come here fishing. And frequently in other spots, that's what fishermen look for. They know that fish hide in those kinds of places.
As long as there aren't snakes.
No.
Okay.
Why don't we turn around here and we'll go back on the creek side of the trail.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh, lichens are everywhere.
You gotta like lichens.
Oh.
This is a leafy kind.
Okay.
Mosquito right there. There you go.
Yes, mosquitoes, so bring the off. Bring your off.
This is a nice plant. This is a wild rose.
Oh, sweet. Oh, it does
And
look
it has little buds.
Oh.
All of the domestic roses are hybrids of the wild rose. Unfortunately, to get some of those brilliant colors and patterns of flowers, many of the smells have been bred out.
Oh.
But wild roses smell so good.
I do see the little tiny buds popping up.
They will produce a round ball when the flower is done called rose hip. And rose hips are full of vitamin C.
Right.
And also very important for wildlife.
Okay, they eat the rosebuds. We're listening to a bird. I can see.
Winter wren. Now that I've identified him, he'll probably be quiet.
The really high-pitched one?
High-pitched one is going.
Yeah. And that's the winter wren.
Winter wren.
And it's migratory.
Yes, it's migratory. Well, no, excuse me, I'm sorry. It's not migratory. You can find winter wrens here all year long. And it's fun. They do nest here, and so you'll get the juveniles. Are you picking up the sound?
A little bit.
because you'll get the juveniles, and talk about a punk-looking bird. They've got funny feathers. They're just learning how to fly, and so they're flying kind of cockeyed. They're a fun bird. They're, as I say, they're here most of the year, and you can usually hear them. So once you identify that one sound, then you can easily pick it up.
Right. But birds have different sounds for different communication pieces. Sometimes I will think I know a bird, and then it's got a different sound, and so it throws me off.
That's right. They have songs, and that's what you're hearing now,
Right.
where they are trying to either defend a territory, attract a mate, or they'll have calls that's just like a one-syllable sound. But when you look in this environment and it's just solid green, you can't see very far, so the way that they communicate is through the song.
It's way, way up there on that middle branch, that dead branch about middle, straight up there. Can you see it?
I see empty branches
It's out right on
Is
the
it?
end.
out on the end. We've got is this a winter wren sighting?
Can't quite tell. For bird watching, you definitely need binoculars.
Need binoculars.
Or very good hearing. In fact,
And that's hard too, to track the sound and then find where they're located.
that's right. In fact, Audubon does a wonderful walk every spring, and it's all birding by ear. Let's see, just forgot his name. Rudy Darling does the trip, and he is an expert on bird sounds. And just the slightest little call, he can identify which bird it is. So that would be another fun thing for you guys
Absolutely.
next spring, because I think he's pretty much done with those trips now. But so that would be a good one.
That is really exciting to be able to just know by sound what the bird is without trying to track it. Okay. Now here are is a post marker, so with these numbered posts you can go to the trail guide and then learn about that particular spot, what's unique there, and this talks about the Mossy Stump.
And it talks about the
Right
various
behind
different wildlife that would live in the forest, with a cute little picture of a raccoon in the brochure. One of the important things about this stump, as well as snags, and a snag is a tall dead tree that has been left in the forest. And both the stumps and the snags are important for wildlife. As you can see, there have been a lot of critters that have burrowed in, drilled holes in, and those stumps and the snags provide an important source of nesting, resting areas for critters, four-legged critters, as well as a lot of different birds.
And the mosses and lichens are helping to break down the wood, the cellulose, and turn it back into soil. Takes a long time, but it's an important process. Yeah. We have a flower here, too.
Yes. Yes, I saw that.
This is called bleeding heart, or the Latin name is Dicentra Formosa. Dicentra is a Greek word for two-spurred. The shape of the flower is kind of like a flattened heart with two spurs on it. Formosa is a Latin word for beautiful. So it's a beautiful spurred flower. Dicentra Formosa has a specific kind of butterfly that will eat it in the larval form to get the poisons that are naturally produced by the plant, so that butterfly will be avoided by predators. Another important part of the ecosystem. This is
what butterfly that is, Kathy? I'm sorry.
Yeah. The butterfly.
Palladian is all I remember.
Okay. Something to research and Google. Now, are we getting close to a bridge?
We are. It's down around the corner a little bit, so we'll peek over there. But before we do that, I wanted to stop and talk about these various different, the cut side of the logs, because this is a fun little exercise to do with kids, and that is to count the rings. And everybody knows that you can count the rings and determine how old they are. But actually, 1 year's growth is made up of 2 rings. It's made up of a light ring and a dark ring. Mm-hmm. The light ring is the growth in the spring, and the darker ring is the growth in the summer. And so what we do with kids is have them start in the middle and count out how many rings they find, first off to see how old they are in comparison to the tree, and then to count all the way out to the edge. And then to look at any abnormalities that they might find. The fact that the rings in the center of the tree are wider than the rings at the edge, which could mean that the tree was growing faster when it was young, and as it got older, it slowed down in growth. There could be things like moisture differences from year to year, so that the trees will grow faster when there's more moisture and slower when there's not. So a tremendous amount of lessons can be learned just by looking at the tree cross-section.
It will show whether there has been a wildfire, as Anne mentioned, I believe. It can also, some of those tree rings can pick up human events, such as a radioactive cloud or something along those lines. So vegetation can be used to record what has happened in the history of the earth.
Right.
I took off a piece of the bark to show you some of the decomposition process, because all of this plant material eventually will go back to soil, or it will be released. The stored carbon and nitrogen will be released into the atmosphere. So if you just pick up a piece of wood on the forest floor, you'll very frequently find either insects, there was a little spider here, or evidence of insects.
Oh yeah, little holes, little pockets.
And you can see growing on the bark is the moss and the lichen, breaking it down into soil. Here's yet another kind of lichen, it looks like. Very interesting things. This is the reproductive structure of that lichen right there.
A little shoot coming out of it.
Right there and right there.
Well,
so
Alice
much
and what was the other
Freddie?
one? Freddie. Had little offshoots. Okay.
And we talk about the importance of trees that are standing. They hold the soil in place. They make food through their leaves for various different birds and critters.
They break the cycle, the intensity of the water that comes from the sky.
And as Kathy mentioned, when they're down on the ground, they also play an important role in terms of enriching the soil. And a tree down on the ground might last anywhere from 100 to 400 years, depending upon the size of the tree. It may take that long for it to fully decompose. So trees on the ground are important.
Yes. And they provide some shelter for critters.
Wildlife, insects, snakes, salamanders,
Bears.
Can't seem to get away from those snakes.
There's that winter wren again. Hopefully we'll hear more of him.
The winter wren is singing us a little song as we walk through the trail. Very nice.
Wrens are very small, and personally I have a hard time finding them, so knowing what they sound like is so important.
That's right.
And we have a cool plant right here, Kathy.
A cool plant.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about this.
This is an azalea, and this is very similar to the azaleas that you would plant in your yard as a landscaping plant. One of the most fragrant blossoms that you can find growing native along the streams. There are some places on the Tahoe, including here, where you'll just walk along the trail and all of a sudden have this beautiful flowery scent and know that there's an azalea somewhere, and then you have to look for it and see if you can find it. So this is western azalea.
Which the landscaped ones that we're used to in our backyard, I don't think they have much of a fragrance. So
Mine don't.
right.
Yeah.
So again, when things are bred, it's usually for how they look versus smell.
Okay.
So that's a consideration.
Right.
We do have local nurseries, however, that sell natives, so if smell is important, you should go with natives.
If you want to recapture your experience on Rock Creek, go to the nursery that has the native plant. The what was the azalea called?
It's Western Azalea. That's
Western
the
azalea.
common name.
Okay. Anne was trying to spot the wren with her binoculars.
We had a woodpecker that went.
Oh.
It was, I didn't get a good enough look at it to determine what kind, but it was one of the smaller woodpeckers.
Shortly into the trail, we've got little bridge with the creek running underneath, and all this, and it is wheelchair accessible, right? A portion of the trail, the first part.
That's right. A portion of the trail is wheelchair accessible. So it's probably maybe of a quarter mile where you can take a wheelchair on this relatively flat and not too steep part of the trail. Unfortunately, when the trail then drops back down to the creek, it becomes too steep for wheelchairs. But this part right here that crosses Rock Creek is a nice, short little jaunt for someone in a wheelchair.
Great.
And we are standing over Rock Creek. And if we're just really quiet for a second, we can listen to the wonderful sound of the creek.
You never get tired of that.
That's right. The metal culvert right there is an actually old culvert from where the water went underneath this bridge. It blew out at one time and they had to reconstruct the bridge. One of the interesting things that I love to do with a group of kids when we're here, especially if we're working with art and observation, if we're working with like an observational lesson, is to ask kids what the color of the creek is. Because most frequently when kids will draw a creek, or any of us, will put it in blue. But when you look at that creek, you know that it's not blue. It's various different shades of browns and golds and reds and almost black color in the shade. And when you can get the reflection, if the reflection down there is reflecting the green of the leaves,
Farther down on the creek.
yes, it looks like you've actually got green reflection rather than the typical blue reflection when it's reflecting the sky. But this creek here along Rock Creek is a wonderful little place to explore the different bugs and critters that are living in the creek. You can find water striders on top, back swimmers, all water boatmen, wonderful named critters that add to the complexity of the creek. And things that are really important for creeks that we don't normally think of is all the debris that we find in the creek here, and that actually is important from the standpoint of it decomposes and makes the area richer, the soil richer along the creek bed. It provides hiding and resting places for the fish. It provides nutrients for the little insects. And so the debris in the creek is actually most important for a healthy creek ecosystem.
And this is natural debris, the twigs and
That's right.
leaves.
That's right. This is all from up above as the water moves down. And this water, the Rock Creek water, will actually go into Lake Vera and then to the South Yuba River and is used for irrigation and drinking water and all of the different things that we use water for.
Well, a small little creek has big importance.
This is interesting at how streams move sediment downhill. This basic mud bank right here was not present last fall. And so this winter, the creek moved all of this dirt down and formed this stream bank right here. And when you find mud like this, this is a great spot to look for animal tracks. Now, I don't know that we'll see any animal tracks, but it looks right there like there's
right.
deer.
Is that big one a dog or is that a bear over there?
It's hard to say. But I do see something that looks like a dog. So when you are out in the forest, a lot of times the wildlife is very secretive. So you don't see the wildlife itself, but you see the evidence of where they have been, either through tracks, that's pine cone, either through tracks or droppings or bits of fur. And so you have to be a detective when you're out walking to determine the types of critters that are all around you.
Well, I'm just now beginning to identify the winter wren call. Now I have to learn track marks too. So much to learn.
This is a pretty little place just to sit.
Sweet.
And again, enjoy the sound, enjoy the ferns on the far side of the creek, the light streaming through the leaves, the moss on the yew tree.
The lighting is incredible.
The flow of the sounds of the water.
And look at the bark on the yew tree, that incredible dappled color, the different shades of red.
You actually can learn a tremendous amount about the forest by just sitting and observing, because there's a wealth of information published in many, many different sources. And if you have a question about the forest, of course you can come to the office and we'd be happy to help you learn more about what you saw, what you discovered.
It does sometimes raise more questions and curiosity. And some of this I'm looking up again, and particularly the Pacific yews that you've been pointing out, a lot of it looks Gothic looking, just the way it drips down with the moss and the scraggy looking tentacles hanging out.
I mentioned as we were walking earlier that you won't find Pacific yew trees out in the middle of the forest. They're going to be growing next to a stream or a water source. And the Pacific yew in this area are truly very old. They're not big, but very old. So the moss has had a chance and the lichen to become established on those trunks for a long time.
Oh my gosh, and these are, it's like an extra layer of bark almost, very thick.
You know, Cheryl, you said that there are so many different things you could ask questions about, and that's one of the things we do with kids, is we have them identify 3 of the top questions that they might have as they walk along the trail. And it forces them to think of, what do I know versus what do I want to know? And to look at what their interests are. And it's amazing the questions that they come up with. Some of which we can answer, some of which we can't, but boy, it sure gives them a lot of research potential for senior projects or for science projects. And also ask them to find the thing that has attracted them the most. What's most unusual, what's most interesting, what's most fun. And again, they come up with a delightful array of all kinds of interesting things about the forest here at Rock Creek.
And you never know what's going to spark that inspiration.
That's right.
It just connects, or that wonder moment, the aha moment.
That's right. Yeah.
So much.
So far today, we've seen the aquatic ecosystem along the creek. We've seen the soil ecosystem. We've also seen the mixed conifer ecosystem. So all of these different ecosystems interconnect to make the forest that we, as we drive through, as we walk through, sometimes we don't think about the complexity of these forest ecosystems.
Right. There's so much. Kathy, I'm looking at the down tree. That has to be hundreds of years maybe now in the breaking down of it.
Definitely. Slow decomposition. It is decomposing a little bit more rapidly because there's moisture here. And that helps in the decomposition process. If we were to go around the corner, we'd see little openings that have different types of plants, such as bear clover, the low-growing shrub that's so full of oils that when you walk through it, it stinks up your clothes.
Oh, really?
Yes. So there are even more ecosystems that we haven't touched upon.
Oh my gosh.
And one of the things that makes the trees grow so well here is the depth and productivity of the soil. Sometimes people don't think about why trees in one area might be really small, and in other areas they're really big, so you expect them to be older. But they may not be.
They're just happy and growing tall, the great soil.
They live in a good neighborhood.
Location.
And this is a great location, close to town, yet far away. So I'm just going to take a moment to enjoy the quiet and listen to the winter wrens And I'm hearing something else now, too.
Sounds like we have a raven in the area. Also heard again a little later the mountain chickadee. It says cheeseburger.
Yes. There's something. Oh, that's the stellar jay.
Oh, and the stellar jay. Right. Very good.
I got one.
You did. That is very good.
The stellars, they're all around, though.
Did you know they're related to crows?
I didn't. I think we think of them being related. There's a sighting.
Up there. There's a couple of them, and they're cavorting in the treetops.
And we've got a couple birds cavorting. What kind?
Stellar jays.
Stellar jays. Oh, no wonder that sound was so loud.
Those are the jays that have the top knot. They're found a little higher in elevation. In the Nevada County area, we have the scrub jay, which has a flat, rounded head, and then the stellar jays. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks think of them as bluebirds or blue jays.
Yes.
Bluebirds are actually a much smaller bird, mm-hmm. and blue jays are found back east. So the two kind of jays we have are stellars and scrub jays.
And Kathy, you were saying they're part of the crow family? And
yes.
not the jay family, though.
No, they're related. They're in the same family, the crow family.
And so jays are part of
the crow
family. My gosh, we need a family chart here. So,
and it's
a family tree.
It's called a bird book. Yes, never go anywhere without your bird book.
And binoculars.
That's right.
Definitely.
Flower book.
And your snake book.
Snake.
Mm-hmm. We can do without
Insect
that.
book.
I don't need to identify snakes. They're all the same. Now, there is a local book called The Sierra Nevadas, I believe, and it's all in one. It's got all the wildflowers. It has all of the trees, birds.
It's a natural history book. It has a flavor of each.
And I think it's called The Natural History of the Sierra Nevada.
Right, natural
Right,
history, yeah.
right.
That's-
By Niehaus, I think.
It was. I'm not sure now.
But one of the fun things to do with kids when you're out like this, so many times it's hard to remember all the tree names, it's hard to remember all the flower names, it's hard to remember all the bird names. And so by having kids really observe what the plant looks like, what the flower looks like, and create their own name, it's a fun activity because it's a good observational exercise and a creative exercise all at once. And even though they may remember their name before they remember the real name, it's a good activity and a fun activity to see who can come up with the most interesting names.
Kathy, thank you so much, and Anne, thank you. And the booklets are available up front at the information trailhead right at the beginning, or at the Tahoe Forest office. And that was a winter wren, right?
Yes.
Yes. Doing a sign-off, I can tell.
That's right.
Very loud. So we'll see you another time in Rock Creek, so close but far away. Thank you.